At my daughter's wedding, she said she had dreamed of having a different father. So I left and, on my daughter's wedding day, I handed her an envelope. A small, simple gesture from a father who had given everything he could. I expected a smile, maybe a tear of gratitude. Instead, she raised her glass and said, "I've always dreamed of having a different father." Then she hugged her father-in-law. I left the hall in silence, but when my daughter opened that envelope, the wedding turned into a nightmare. 6 months earlier, $45,000. Letitia's voice sliced through the air of her pristine Bloomfield Hills townhouse like glass cracking under pressure. I stood there in my best shirt, a faded button-down I'd ironed twice, and held my old cap in both hands. Her living room gleamed like a showroom, white furniture, glass tables, chrome fixtures, and artwork that probably cost more than my yearly income. "Tia, sweetheart." I started softly, but she was already flipping through wedding magazines stacked on the table. Thick, glossy issues filled with pictures of luxury. "Look at this venue." "Dad," she said, tapping a photo of a mansion with white columns. "This is where successful people get married." "This is where I'm getting married." My throat tightened. I'd driven there rehearsing what to say, that I could help with a few thousand, maybe lend a hand setting up tables. "But 45,000? "The flowers are $8,000, she went on, flipping another page. "The photographer's $5. The dress I want is $3,500. "But it's perfect." I swallowed hard. My entire savings, every dollar saved from 40 years at the Ford plant, totaled $12,000. My pension and Social Security barely covered the basics. "I have $12,000, I said quietly. "That's everything I can manage." "Maybe I could take a small loan." Her face changed instantly. The excitement drained away, replaced by cold disbelief. 12,000? Seriously? She stood up, her voice rising. "Other fathers take out loans, sell their cars, even remortgage their homes. What are you willing to do for your own daughter?" Her words hit harder than any punch. I'd raised this girl alone after her mother, Elena, died. I'd worked double shifts to buy her new clothes, sacrificed weekends, and put her through college. "Tia." "I can try," I said, glancing around her luxury home. "But maybe we can find something more what?" "Cheap," she snapped, throwing a magazine onto the table. "Do you know what Marcus's father is paying for his daughter's wedding?" 60,000. And that's considered modest. Marcus, her fiancé. His father, Dennis Hargrave, owned half the restaurants downtown. "I'm 35, Dad. This is my one chance to have the wedding I deserve. My friends' fathers move heaven and earth for them. And you?" Her eyes swept over me, my worn jacket, my calloused hands. "You're just a failure." The word hung in the air, poisonous and heavy. I couldn't find my voice. She kept going. "All my friends will have perfect weddings, and I'll be stuck with some backyard barbecue because my father can't manage what everyone else can. Do you know how embarrassing that is?" I wanted to tell her about the plant layoffs, about Elena's hospital bills, about the long nights and sacrifices. But no words came. "You've had 35 years to figure out how to be successful," she said coldly. "And this is all you have to show for it?" She opened the door and pointed outside. "Just leave, Dad. I can't look at you right now." The door slammed. I stood in her driveway, surrounded by luxury cars, staring at my old Ford truck. The evening air felt heavy. I imagined Elena watching from somewhere far away, disappointed. When I finally got home, the silence hurt. I turned on the lamp beside her old reading chair, the one she used to sit in while talking about Letitia's future. On the mantel, photos of happier days, graduations, family dinners, looked back at me. "Maybe you were right, Elena," I whispered. "Maybe I really am a failure. $12,000. 40 years of work." A daughter who now looked at me with disgust. I sat at the kitchen table staring at my bills. 18 months left on the mortgage. A pension that barely stretched far enough. And yet, maybe there was still something I could do. I picked up the phone and called the bank. The next morning, I walked into Chase Bank on Woodward Avenue. Glass and steel reached into the Detroit sky. Everything about the building screamed importance. Inside, young professionals in tailored suits talked money like it was air. I felt out of place, but Elena's voice echoed in my head. "Stand tall, Dewey. You're as good as anyone." When my turn came, a young loan officer smiled politely. Her name tag read Sandra Williams. "Mr. Gomez, how can I help you today?" "I need a personal loan," I said. 45,000. "For my daughter's wedding," she typed on her computer. "I see you're retired from Ford, 40 years of service." "That's impressive," then her tone softened. "However, given your income and age, the most we can approve is 35,000. The interest rate would be 18%. 18. My heart sank. That means, she calculated, you'd repay about 52,000 over 5 years. Monthly payments of roughly 870. More than half my pension. "She's worth every penny," I said quietly. "Where do I sign?" An hour later, I walked out with a cashier's check for worth 35,000. Added to my savings, that made 47. More than my daughter had asked for. For the first time in months, I felt proud. I wasn't a failure. I was a father doing what fathers do, giving everything for his child. I drove straight to Bloomfield Hills, the check burning in my jacket pocket like a piece of hope. When Letitia opened the door, she looked surprised. "Dad." "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you," I said, smiling. I handed her the envelope. "Here's 47,000. I took a loan. Now you can have the wedding of your dreams." But she didn't smile. Instead, she sighed. "Oh, Dad, that's not necessary anymore." I froze. "What do you mean?" "Dennis is paying for the entire wedding," she said casually. "He said I deserve the best." Her words hit harder than the loan paperwork ever could, but "I took a loan at 18% interest," she waved her hand dismissively. "Just return it. Dennis wants his son's wedding to be perfect. He understands my worth. Worth better." The phrase echoed in my mind like a hammer. When did he offer?" I managed to ask. "Yesterday afternoon," she said, catching herself. "Right after we talked." Yesterday afternoon, while I was home torturing myself for being a failure, Dennis Hargrave had made me irrelevant with a single phone call. "Look at this venue," she said, holding up a glossy photo. Her smile was bright again. "Isn't it beautiful?" I nodded faintly, but all I could see was the envelope in her hands. The envelope that carried $47,000, my life savings, my sacrifice, my love. And to her, it meant nothing. The Townsend Hotel Grand Ballroom. Dennis had booked it for the entire weekend. "The photographer did the governor's daughter's wedding last year," Letitia said, her voice glowing with pride. I pulled the envelope back toward my chest, suddenly aware of how foolish I must have looked, thinking $47,000 meant something to people who lived in her world. "The flowers alone will be 12,000, she continued, not even noticing my silence. "Dennis said cost shouldn't matter when it comes to making me happy." Isn't that wonderful? Wonderful. Yes, it was wonderful that someone understood her worth, someone who wasn't me, a retired factory worker living on a pension. "Dad, are you okay?" "You look pale." "Just tired," I lied, tucking the envelope back into my jacket. "I should go return this to the bank." "Good idea," she said without looking up. "No point paying interest on money you don't need." She was already lost in her magazines again, planning a wedding funded by someone else's love. I walked toward the door. My footsteps echoed through the pristine hallway. Behind me, she hummed softly as she turned the glossy pages, dreaming of a life that no longer needed me. "Thanks for thinking of me, though," she called out as I reached for the handle. "It's sweet that you tried. Sweet that I tried. Like a child trying to help the adults with real work." I sat in my truck for 10 minutes before starting the engine, staring at her perfect house through the windshield. My reflection looked foreign, a man trying to understand where he'd gone wrong. 3 miles down the road, I had to pull over. My hands were shaking too badly to drive. The envelope in my jacket felt like it was burning through the fabric. 40 years I gave her everything. And to her, I was nothing but a backup plan, easily replaced by someone with deeper pockets. I parked in front of an abandoned auto parts store. The lot was empty and cracked, forgotten, like everything I thought I meant to my daughter. "Elena," I whispered to the wind. "Would you still call her our girl if you saw what she's become?" The drive home felt longer than usual. Detroit rolled past my window, shuttered factories, boarded up homes, ghosts of people who'd worked hard and still lost everything. People like me, but first I had one last thing to do. Sandra looked surprised when I walked back into Chase Bank 30 minutes before closing. Mr. Gomez, is everything all right? I need to cancel the loan, I said quietly. Early repayment penalty. Whatever it costs, her professional smile faltered. Are you sure? We just processed this today. The penalty is $500. I'll pay it. 15 minutes later, the paperwork was done. Sandra kept glancing at me like she wanted to ask why, but bankers know when to mind their business. I slid the canceled check back. Across her desk, the same check that had once represented my greatest sacrifice. Your account will be debited for the penalty fee by tomorrow, she said softly. $500 for the privilege of humiliation. Money well spent. At home, the silence felt different. Not heavy, clean. I made Elena's favorite tea and sat in her old chair, staring at the photos on the mantel. There she was, Letitia at her high school graduation, hugging me tight, whispering, "Thank you for everything. Dad, I couldn't have done this without you. College graduation. You made this possible. I'll never forget what you sacrificed for me." When had gratitude turned into entitlement? When had love become something she managed rather than cherished? Maybe it was time to stop begging for crumbs of appreciation from my own daughter. The wedding invitation lay on the kitchen table. Elegant cream cardstock, gold lettering. The honor of your presence is requested. Honor. What an interesting choice of words. I picked up the phone to call her, then set it down again. Tomorrow would be soon enough. Tonight, I just needed to think about what kind of father I still wanted to be. The tea was Elena's blend, chamomile and mint. She always said it helped her think clearly. I sipped it slowly, watching the evening fade through dusty windows in a house that needed repairs I couldn't afford. But somehow, for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning came with unusual clarity. Instead of calling Letitia like I always did, I made coffee, read the newspaper cover to cover, and let the phone ring when it buzzed at 8:30. "Dad, call me back. We need to discuss your outfit for the engagement party." Engagement party? That was new. When I finally called her back hours later, she sounded impatient. "Where have you been?" "I've been trying to reach you." "Reading," I said calmly. "What engagement party?" "Saturday night at Dennis's club." "Nothing too formal." Her tone shifted, careful, measured. "Actually, maybe it's better if you sit this one out. Dennis's friends will be there. And you understand, like, they're used to a certain level." "Level?" I asked quietly. She hesitated. "Well, you know, professional people. Business owners. They might not relate to what? A factory worker?" "Don't be like that, Dad," she said quickly. "It's just easier this way." Easier. Everything with her had become about what was easier. By late April, the pattern was clear. Wedding meetings I wasn't invited to. Vendor consultations scheduled when I couldn't attend. A growing list of events where my absence was understandable. By May, our conversations were rehearsed. She'd call with demands dressed as requests. I'd offer help that wasn't polished enough, and she'd find ways to exclude me. When the dress-fitting invitation came, it came with a warning. "You can come, but please don't talk too much. And wear something nice, actually. Do you even have anything appropriate?" I wore my best shirt and tie to the bridal salon in downtown Birmingham. The place gleamed like a museum. Marble floors, crystal lights, gowns displayed like relics. Letitia's friends were already there. 3 women in designer clothes, talking about weddings that cost more than I'd made in a year. "Ladies, this is my father," Letitia said with a polite smile. "He's very simple, but he means well. Simple." The word lingered like perfume. Sweet, but suffocating. I stood quietly in the corner while they talked alterations and florals, feeling like a guard in a museum, present, but invisible. "Your father's sweet," one whispered, loud enough for me to hear. "It's nice that you include him, like charity work." That night, I drove to Woodlawn Cemetery for the first time since Elena's birthday. Her grave was modest, a simple headstone surrounded by daisies I'd planted years ago. "Elena," I whispered, kneeling beside it. "I can't do this anymore. She needs to know the truth." The night air was still. Only distant traffic from 8 Mile broke the silence. You remember what the social worker said? I continued softly. Someday she might want to know about her real parents. Maybe someday is now. I went home, stopped at the drugstore for paper and envelopes, and started writing 6 drafts later. I finally had the letter right. Honest, calm, and true. When I sealed it 2 days later, my hands didn't shake. That's when I noticed it. The wedding invitation's time. It was different from what Letitia had told me. 2 hours different. I stared at it until the numbers blurred, understanding exactly what that meant. St. Paul Church glowed in the May sunlight. I parked at 12:55, 5 minutes early for the 1 o'clock ceremony. Perfect timing. The organ music drifted through the doors as I climbed the steps. "Excuse me, are you going in?" A woman in a navy dress said, rushing past. "We're so late." Late? I checked my watch. 12:58, more guests hurried past, anxious and flustered. Through the doors, I could hear the priest's voice, not prelude music, but vows. "Oh, you're late too?" said an older man beside me, wiping his forehead. The ceremony started at noon. Traffic was awful. My hand froze on the handle. "Noon?" I asked. "Mine says 1. He pulled out his invitation, cream cardstock, gold lettering, identical to mine except for one small difference. His said 12 live p.m. He looked from mine to his, then back again. "That's strange," he said softly. "Are you family?" The word caught in my throat. I'm the bride's father." His eyes widened with sympathy. "Oh, I thought that gentleman with the gray hair was her father. The one who walked her down the aisle. Dennis." Through the stained glass windows, I saw them, Letitia radiant in white, Marcus beside her, and Dennis in the front pew where I should have been. The man who'd walked her down the aisle. 35 years of fatherhood erased by one small lie. One altered time on an invitation. I stood there alone on the church steps, the sound of organ music echoing through the doors, my hands trembling around the paper that proved I was no longer part of her world, not forgotten, erased. I turned away and walked across the street to the small park. The sealed envelope in my jacket pocket felt heavier than ever. Some truths, I realized, couldn't wait for the right moment. I sat on a bench with a clear view of the church, late guests still rushing in, expensive cars filling the lot, and opened the envelope I'd brought as her wedding gift. It no longer held a check, just a letter 4 handwritten. Pages, the story she'd never been told, about the phone call that changed everything, about a 16-year-old girl who couldn't keep her baby, and about Elena and me, 2 people who couldn't have children, given a miracle we'd never expected, my dear Tia. The letter began with words that had taken me a lifetime to write. There are things you must know before you begin your new life, truths about who you really are, and what you've lost today by choosing strangers over the man who raised you as his own. I folded the pages and sealed them inside the wedding envelope, the same one that once carried $47,000 I'd borrowed to make her dreams come true. Now it held something far more valuable. The truth. The money went back into my wallet. I was done being her provider. This was no longer about saving her future. It was about saving what was left of my dignity. "Elena," I whispered to the empty churchyard air. "Forgive me, but she needs to know what she really lost today." The church bells began to ring, announcing the end of the ceremony I had never been meant to attend. Through the stained glass, I saw movement. The wedding party preparing for their triumphant exit. The crowd would cheer. The cameras would flash, and she would smile, believing her new life had begun without consequence. I stood from the park bench, brushing dust from the same dark suit I'd worn to Elena's funeral, to Tia's graduation, to every milestone that mattered. Today, it would serve one last purpose. My reflection in my phone screen looked unfamiliar. Not the broken man begging for appreciation, but someone who had finally remembered his worth. When I crossed the street, the church doors opened, and guests spilled into the sunlight, laughing, embracing, unaware that a ghost was walking among them. I joined the flow of well-wishers, an envelope in my hand, calm and deliberate. Inside that envelope wasn't a gift of money, but of truth. The reception glittered with opulence, crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, and floral arrangements that probably cost more than my pension. Tia stood in the center of it all, radiant, the perfect bride, Marcus stood beside her, smiling proudly. And hovering nearby, Dennis, the man who had replaced me. When she saw me, her face brightened with polite surprise. Dad, you came. I was worried when you weren't at the church. Must have been a printing mix-up. A printing mix-up. That's what she called it. I smiled faintly. Probably just an error, I said. Congratulations, Tia. I held out the envelope with both hands. This gift? It's very important. Something in my tone made her pause. For a moment, she actually looked at me. Really looked. Thank you. Dad, that's so sweet of you, she said softly. Sweet. The same word she used when she belittled every sacrifice I ever made. Then Dennis appeared, all charm and confidence. Finally, we meet. Letitia's told me so much about you. I shook his hand firmly. I'm sure she has. You've been very generous, he laughed. Nothing's too good for my new daughter. She deserves the very best. I looked at him, then at her. Yes, I said quietly. The very best. Tia turned to introduce me to her friends, but halfway through, she passed the envelope to Marcus. Honey, put this with the other gifts, and just like that. It was gone, placed neatly on the gift table among the designer. Boxes and luxury wrapping, somewhere. In that pile of ribbons and gold paper lay the truth that would shatter her perfect world. A woman beside me smiled. Such a beautiful ceremony. You must be proud, I nodded slowly. Very proud, I said, my eyes fixed on Tia, the daughter who no longer saw me. The photographer weaved through the crowd, capturing moments of joy. I wondered if he caught the one where I handed her the envelope, the instant when love quietly transformed into justice. Then came the toast. Tia raised her glass. Standing beneath the chandeliers, the city skyline blazing behind her. I want to thank everyone who made this day possible, she began, her voice clear, confident, rehearsed. Then her eyes found Dennis. Especially Dennis, she said. You've shown me what it means to have a father who truly cares. I've always wanted a different father. And today, that dream has come true. The room froze. The sound of her words echoed through silence. Champagne glasses hovered midair. Conversations died. Every eye flickered toward me, then quickly away. Even Dennis looked uncertain for a moment, but then he smiled, proud to play the part she'd written for him. Letitia, he said, his voice loud and smooth. You're the daughter I never had. A few guests clapped politely, then stopped when they saw my face, calm, unreadable. I didn't need to say a word. In that moment, I understood everything. She hadn't changed. She had only grown into the kind of person she was always meant to be, the kind who mistook money for love. I set my glass down, straightened my jacket, and walked out. No anger, no scene, just quiet dignity. Behind me, the music resumed, the laughter returned, and the photographer continued his work, though I heard some guests asking him to delete the toast photos. By the time I reached the parking garage, I felt lighter. The letter, my real wedding gift, waited among her presents, patient and powerful. Inside were the adoption papers. The truth. The proof that she had never been mine by blood, only by choice. My truck started on the first try, steady as ever. Detroit's skyline shimmered behind me as I drove home in silence. Hours later, the phone began to ring. Dad, we're opening gifts now. Her voice bubbled through the voicemail. Some of these are incredible. 10 minutes later, Dad, are you there? We found your envelope. What kind of gift needs to be opened privately? Another call. Then another. Dad, I read your letter. This isn't funny. Call me back. Her voice trembled. By the fourth call, panic had replaced anger. Dad, this can't be true. You're lying. Call me right now. I unplugged the phone. I moved through the house quietly, gathering what little I needed for the road ahead. Elena's wedding ring, our photo from Tia's college graduation, my old tools. The rest could stay behind with the ghosts. 53 missed calls later. I loaded the last bag into my truck, through the voicemails. I heard her voice break, disbelief, then grief, then realization. You're not my real father? Then who am I? Even now, she still couldn't understand. Fatherhood isn't about blood. It's about choice. As I pulled out of the driveway, the setting sun painted the sky in Elena's favorite colors, orange and gold. I drove south on I-75, the radio playing Sinatra's My Way. Detroit faded behind me, its skyline shrinking to nothing. "Elena," I said softly to her photo on the dashboard, "I finally did what needed to be done. 35 years I gave love to an ungrateful child. Now it's time to live for myself." The truck hummed steadily, the road unfolding like freedom itself. Maybe I'd head for Cincinnati. Maybe Louisville. Somewhere warm. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I could just be me again. Not the disappointing father, not the forgotten man. The phone stayed off. The past stayed behind. For the first time in decades, I wasn't driving toward obligation. I was driving toward peace. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.